The brass key. The key was cold. That's the thing I keep coming back to. 3 months later, sitting in what used to be my aunt's study with coffee going cold beside me and case files spread across a desk that still smells like her, cedar and old paper and something floral I never thought to ask the name of. The key is antique brass, small enough to disappear in my fist, and it was cold when the lawyer slid it across that mahogany table inside a cream envelope with my name written in handwriting I'd have recognized anywhere. And across that table, my father's face went white. Not confused. Not grieving. White, the specific white of a man who has just realized that the locked room where he's been hiding bodies has been quietly, methodically opened from the inside, by someone he thought was already dead. That's where this story really starts. Not with the inheritance. Not with the lawsuit. Not even with the garage and the manila folder and the receipt that proved I was sold for $13,000 when I was 16 years old. It starts with that look on my father's face. And the key, cold in my palm, that explained everything. My name is Claire. Claire Aldridge, or at least, that's the name I've used for 29 years. The name written on my nursing license, my apartment lease, my employee badge at the children's hospital where I've worked for 6 years identifying abuse that other people walk right past. It's the name my parents gave me when they took me in at 16, presenting themselves to the entire Northeast Portland neighborhood as the kind of people who rescue children nobody else wants. Thomas and Diane Aldridge. He sold insurance at a mid-sized firm downtown, respectable enough, $68,000 a year, the kind of job that sounds stable at dinner parties. She worked as a school secretary at Fairview Elementary, which was either deeply ironic or deliberately chosen, I still haven't decided. They lived in a yellow house with white trim on Beaumont Street, front porch, prize-winning roses that Diane tended every Sunday morning and gardening gloves she kept hung by the back door. The neighbors brought soup when I had the flu. The family across the street helped Thomas fix the fence every spring. Everyone knew everyone's business on that street. And their business was solid, respectable, and completely fabricated. I believed the story for 13 years. We saved you from the system, Claire. Diane said this so often it became wallpaper, background noise I stopped really hearing. Asterisk, do you know what happens to kids who age out without families? We gave you stability. We gave you a future. Some gratitude would be appropriate. Asterisk. I was grateful. I was endlessly, exhaustingly grateful. I didn't ask about my past because asking felt like biting the hand. I didn't push about the gaps in my memory because some part of me suspected the gaps were protecting me. I built my life on the foundation they provided and tried not to notice that the foundation had always felt slightly wrong, slightly tilted, like a house where all the doors stick a little and you stop questioning it because that's just how the house is. I became a pediatric nurse because I understood frightened children in a way I couldn't explain. Something in me knew the flinch. Knew the hypervigilance. Knew the particular way a child makes themselves very small and very agreeable when they're around adults they don't trust. I thought it was empathy. It was memory. I found the folder 3 months before Aunt Ruth died. Ruth Whitmore. Diane's estranged sister, the problematic one, the eccentric one, the woman we were explicitly forbidden from visiting or maintaining any kind of relationship with. Diane described her as bitter, mentally unstable, someone who'd made unconventional life choices and resented anyone who hadn't. Thomas backed this up consistently. Asterisk, Ruth always hated that we took you in. She wanted to undermine our family. Stay away from her, Claire. She'll fill your head with things that aren't true. Asterisk. So naturally, I'd been meeting Ruth for coffee every Tuesday for 4 years. Powell's Books, second floor, the small reading room in the back where you could talk without being overheard. She'd arrive with pastries and ask careful questions about my nursing rotations, my patients, my plans. She slipped me envelopes of cash for textbooks and clinical supplies and stethoscopes the Aldridges claimed they couldn't afford. She texted me things like your instincts about that patient were correct, always trust them and *, they have no idea what you're capable of. Keep protecting those children *. I thought she was a lonely, generous woman who'd been unfairly cut off from family. I had no idea she was building a case. I was helping my parents clear their garage before a renovation when I found it. Behind dusty Christmas decorations and a stack of Thomas's old work files, there was a plain manila folder. My name on the front in Diane's careful handwriting, the handwriting that won a penmanship award in 3rd grade, the handwriting I'd seen on birthday cards and permission slips and grocery lists my entire life. Inside were financial documents, bank transfer receipts, correspondence. I stood in that garage for what felt like a very long time before I understood what I was reading. These weren't adoption records. They weren't legal fees or court documents or anything connected to the story I'd been told about being a foster child they'd chosen out of love and duty. These were transaction records. Payment confirmations. Terms and conditions for services rendered. The email was printed on paper that had gone slightly yellow at the edges. The sender's address was Thomas's work account. * payment confirmed. $13,000. Terms agreed per our discussion. Pick up Monday 6 p.m. Usual location. Return arrangement activated if placement proves unsatisfactory. The reply, from an address I didn't recognize. Understood. Claire has been prepared for extended stay. No contact with birth family during placement period. She's been told this is temporary volunteer work. Discretion appreciated as always. I read it 4 times. 5. My hands weren't shaking because my body hadn't caught up to my brain yet. There's a delay that happens with this kind of shock, a buffering period where you understand the words individually but the full meaning is still loading, still assembling itself into something your nervous system can actually process. The summer I was 16, I hadn't been volunteering with the Hargrove family while Mrs. Hargrove recovered from surgery. I had been sold to them. I remembered that summer with new and devastating clarity, standing in my parents' garage holding a document that proved I was property. The Hargrove estate on the western edge of the city. The circular driveway. The way Mrs. Hargrove inspected my appearance every morning, adjusting my posture, commenting on my clothing, suggesting different outfits when their associates visited. The men who came to dinner parties and seemed more interested in me than in whatever business they were supposedly discussing. The looks. The comments about potential and opportunity and what kind of future a girl like me could have if she was flexible and understanding. I'd been returned to the Aldridges on a Thursday in late August because Mrs. Hargrove declared me too willful for our purposes. I asked too many questions. I set too many limits. I showed insufficient appreciation for the opportunities being provided. Thomas picked me up with more money in his pocket than he'd left with. I knew this because the folder contained his handwritten calculation. $13,000 initial payment minus $10,700 return fee equals $2,300 net profit. Acceptable for trial run. Trial run. I was a trial run. I put the folder back exactly where I'd found it, behind the Christmas decorations, and walked back into the house and sat at the kitchen table and drank a glass of water while Diane moved around me making lunch, and I didn't say a single word. I called Ruth that night from my car, 3 blocks away, engine running. She picked up on the first ring. Like she'd been waiting. I found it, I said. A long pause. Then, I know. I've been waiting for you to find it for years. We need to talk, Claire. Not on this phone. Come to the house Tuesday. Don't tell them. She hung up before I could ask what house she meant. Ruth Whitmore had lived alone in a Victorian mansion on the north side of the city for 20 years. She'd worked in technology that nobody really understood, cybersecurity, data protection, systems architecture. She'd never married, never had children, built her company from nothing in her spare bedroom and sold it 11 years later for more money than anyone who knew her would have guessed. She lived modestly by choice, drove a 10-year-old car, wore clothes from thrift stores, kept the thermostat low. The mansion had been in the family, not purchased. She'd simply refused to sell it. The inside, I discovered that Tuesday, was not modest at all. Not the study, anyway. 6 monitors arranged in a semicircle, a server rack humming quietly in climate-controlled cabinets, backup drives stacked with the kind of methodical organization that suggests military training or genuine obsession. David, the cybersecurity specialist Ruth apparently kept on quiet retainer, explained it to me with barely concealed professional admiration. Asterisk, this isn't consumer equipment. Military-grade encryption. Multiple redundant backups. International cloud storage. This setup would make some government agencies uncomfortable. Asterisk. Ruth sat across from me in a wingback chair, smaller than I remembered, tired in a way she usually hid, and told me everything. She'd hired a private investigator in 2011. 1 month after she learned what the Aldridges had done to me that summer. Rebecca Holt, license number PI 201908834. Ruth had been paying her continuously for 13 years, $23,500 total, spread across 347 pages of surveillance notes, financial analysis, background investigations on client families, and documentation of a criminal network that had started with me and grown into something that made my stomach turn. Thomas and Diane Aldridge, Ruth said, her voice even and precise, asterisk, have been running a placement service for 11 years. They identify teenagers aging out of foster care. Kids with no family connections, no advocates, no one who would notice if they moved into private arrangements. They offer temporary housing as a bridge to independence. Then they introduce longer-term opportunities that sound legitimate until they don't. Asterisk. The financial records covered a dining room table. Payments from 17 different client families. Ranging from my original $13,000 to recent placements commanding $25,000 or more. A business registered downtown, Bright Futures Youth Consulting LLC, Incorporated 2012, registered agent Thomas Aldridge, stated purpose family placement consulting and temporary guardianship services for at-risk youth. On paper, they were specialists helping families navigate temporary arrangements for teenagers who needed support. In reality, they were trafficking children. And they'd been doing it since the summer they returned me to themselves with $2,300 in profit and called it a trial run. There are currently 6 active placements, Ruth said, her hands folded in her lap, very still. Asterisk 6 teenagers. Across Oregon and Washington. Rebecca identified them 2 weeks ago. Asterisk. She looked at me then. Really looked at me. Asterisk, I'm dying, Claire. Pancreatic cancer, 6 to 8 weeks. I've spent 13 years building this case and I need someone to finish it. I need someone who understands what these children are experiencing in a way that investigators don't. I need someone the federal prosecutor will trust as a witness. Asterisk. She needed me. She'd been preparing me. Every Tuesday at Powell's. Every envelope of cash for nursing school. Every text about trusting my instincts and protecting children. 13 years of quiet, patient, deliberate preparation. I've already spoken to an attorney, she said. Asterisk Benjamin Marsh. He's been helping me organize everything since 2018. He'll guide you through what comes next. But Claire, asterisk, she paused, and for a moment the tiredness broke through everything else and I saw just how much this had cost her. Asterisk, you need to be ready. When I die, they're going to come for the inheritance. And you need to let them. Their greed is the final piece of the trap. Asterisk. Ruth Whitmore died 6 weeks later. The text message she sent me 3 days before the end. Asterisk, the security system password is pediatric 1, 3rd floor. The evidence package is complete. Trust Benjamin completely. With love and respect for the warrior you've become. R**. I thought about that word. Warrior. I was a pediatric nurse who cried in my car sometimes after particularly brutal shifts. I wore compression socks and kept protein bars in my scrubs pockets and had a very established rating system for hospital cafeteria coffee. I didn't feel like a warrior. I felt like someone whose hands were shaking as she read a goodbye text from the only person who'd ever really seen her. Benjamin Marsh occupied offices on the 42nd floor of a downtown tower, old money discretion written into everything, from the Persian rugs to the leather-bound volumes to the carefully selected view of the river that managed to look both calming and expensive simultaneously. Mid-50s, silver hair, the kind of tailoring that whispers rather than announces. His handshake was brief and firm. "Thank you for coming quickly," he said. "We're waiting for your parents." Thomas and Diane arrived 12 minutes late. Diane wore her best church dress, navy blue, reserved for funerals and parent-teacher conferences, paired with pearls that had belonged to her mother. Thomas came straight from work, tie slightly crooked, briefcase worn at the corners, already checking his phone and muttering about a missed commission on a policy renewal. Their agitation was visible and disproportionate. I attributed it, for about 45 seconds, to grief. Then I remembered the transaction records. The handwritten calculation. The trial run notation. Their agitation wasn't grief. It was preparation. We settled into the conference room, long mahogany table, burgundy leather chairs, the kind of space designed specifically for conversations that matter. Thomas and Diane sat across from me like we were negotiating terms of surrender rather than attending a reading of a dead woman's will. Benjamin's file folder was unusually thick. As he opened it, I caught glimpses of stock certificates, property deeds, bank statements, and what appeared to be surveillance photographs. He cleared his throat. "Ruth Whitmore lived modestly by choice," he began, "but she accumulated considerable wealth through investments and business ventures that most people, including her family, didn't know about." He walked through the real estate first. The Victorian mansion, professionally appraised at $3.2 million including furnishings and artwork. Investment portfolios assembled with remarkable patience, technology stocks purchased when nobody believed in them, real estate in 3 cities, diversified holdings that had compounded quietly for decades. The sale of her cybersecurity company in 2019, which had netted $5.7 million after taxes and legal fees. The total estimated estate value, Benjamin said, and paused in the way that people pause before delivering numbers that will change a room, is $18.20 million. He let it sit. Per the terms of Ruth Whitmore's last will and testament, executed September 15 of this year and witnessed by myself and 2 colleagues, the entirety of this estate passes to Claire Marie Aldridge. The silence lasted maybe 4 seconds. Thomas's chair scraped back against the marble floor like a gunshot. "There must be a mistake." His voice was cracking already, the professional composure dissolving faster than I expected. Ruth had dementia. Everyone knew it. She was confused, repetitive. She didn't recognize people. She wasn't competent to make these kinds of decisions. Diane's voice rose to something approaching a shriek, echoing off the conference room ceiling. Claire isn't even real family. We took her in out of charity when she was 16 years old. This will cannot possibly be legal. Ruth resented us her entire life. She did this to punish us. She was mentally incompetent and Claire took advantage of **. I anticipated these concerns, Benjamin said. Not loudly. He barely raised his voice at all. But something in his tone stopped Diane mid-sentence the way a hand on a shoulder stops a stumbling person. Which is why Mrs. Whitmore underwent comprehensive neurological testing 3 weeks before her death, He slid copies of a medical evaluation across the table. Dr. Angela Reeves at the Portland Neurology Institute administered the Montreal Cognitive Assessment on September 28. Mrs. Whitmore scored 29 out of 30 possible points. Her mental capacity was not only intact, but exceptional for her age. Dr. Reeves's notes specifically describe superior memory, clear reasoning, and complete understanding of complex financial and legal concepts. The silence that followed was a different quality of silence. Patricia's face had gone from red to a grayish color that made me wonder clinically whether she needed to sit down. Thomas stopped moving entirely, standing frozen behind his chair, staring at the medical documents like they were written in a language he needed a moment to translate. Benjamin reached for a sealed envelope that had been lying beside his legal pad throughout the entire meeting. "Ruth wanted Claire to have this," he said. Her instructions were specific about the timing. The envelope was cream-colored, good paper, substantial in the hand. My name on the front in handwriting I'd have recognized anywhere, the same handwriting from the Tuesday pastry envelopes, from the encouraging texts, from 4 years of small kindnesses I now understood were pieces of something much larger. For Claire, when they try to take what's yours. Inside, an antique brass key. Small. Cold. And a folded note. Check my home security system. Password, Pediatric 1, 3rd floor. Start with the monthly visitor files. Pay attention to every third Thursday. You'll find everything you need to understand who your fake family really is and what they've been doing. The evidence is organized for immediate transfer to federal authorities. Benjamin has instructions. Trust him. With love, R**. I looked up from the note. Thomas and Diane were staring at the key. Not at me. Not at Benjamin. At the key, with expressions I had never in my life seen on their faces before. Not confusion. Not grief. Not anger about the will or the money or any of it. Fear. Pure, undiluted, recognized themselves in the crosshair's fear. What security system? I asked. Benjamin allowed himself a very small smile. Mrs. Whitmore installed a comprehensive smart home system throughout her house in January 2021. Motion sensors in every room, high-definition audio and video recording, cloud backup with international servers. She was very concerned about protecting herself and documenting certain interactions. Thomas's voice came out as something I can only describe as a croak. She recorded conversations. Everything, Benjamin replied. 24 hours a day for 3 years and 2 months. Audio, video, timestamped, GPS verified. All completely legal under Oregon's single-party consent statute. I watched their faces cycle through disbelief, calculation, panic, and something that looked, beneath everything else, like resignation. They weren't reacting like innocent people who'd just learned their relative had been paranoid about home security. They were reacting like people who'd had very specific conversations in that house and were now doing rapid mental inventory of exactly what had been said. The process server found me 4 days later in the middle of a shift. I was adjusting in 4 line for a 7-year-old named Marcus, pneumonia, responding well, the kind of patient who makes you remember why you chose the work, when the desk called up. We have a gentleman here who needs to serve legal papers to Claire Aldridge. Says it's urgent. The lawsuit was more comprehensive than I'd expected and more aggressively crafted than I could have prepared myself for. Thomas and Diane had hired Callaway and Strite, one of Portland's most expensive probate litigation firms, on a retainer that I knew represented their entire retirement savings liquidated. The documents painted me as a predator, undue influence by non-blood relative over mentally incompetent decedent, resulting in fraudulent will execution and estate misappropriation. The timeline told the real story. They'd filed within 72 hours of the will reading, complete with detailed medical allegations, sworn witness statements, and professional financial analysis. Most people need weeks to process grief and retain attorneys. Thomas and Diane had been planning this before Ruth's body was cold. The supporting documentation included statements from neighbors about Ruth's supposed mental decline and my suspicious behavior during visits, the exact same specific examples repeated across every statement, with a consistency that didn't suggest organic community concern. It suggested coordination. It suggested a script that had been written, distributed, and rehearsed. She talked to empty rooms. She forgot conversations she'd just had. She was paranoid about being recorded. She repeated stories about family betrayal. The script was too perfect. Too uniform across too many sources. Someone had been preparing this character assassination for months, possibly longer. This wasn't a reaction to the will reading. This was the other half of a trap, theirs, that had been waiting for the right moment. The Whisper campaign moved through Portland's social networks with the efficiency of a coordinated operation. My phone began ringing with concerned calls from people who'd known me since childhood, each one carrying variations on the same carefully worded story. Ruth had been showing signs of dementia for months. I had taken advantage of her confusion. I had isolated her from the people who loved her. I had changed her while she was too far gone to understand what she was signing. My supervisor at the hospital, Dr. Patricia Osei, a woman I'd respected for 6 years, called me into risk management for what she described as a routine discussion. The room said otherwise. Fluorescent lighting, beige walls, a table that looked like it was designed for conversations nobody wanted to have. Dr. Osei was accompanied by someone from HR and someone from hospital administration, and that combination in that room at that moment meant exactly one thing. We've received several concerning calls, she said. Asterisk questions have been raised about whether there were ethical improprieties in your relationship with the deceased. We need to ensure there's no conflict of interest affecting your work with vulnerable patients. Asterisk. The implication was surgical and deliberate. If I could manipulate a vulnerable elderly woman, how could a children's hospital trust me with vulnerable children? Asterisk, we're placing you on administrative leave pending an internal review. This isn't disciplinary action. Asterisk. I cleaned out my locker in silence. The pediatric ward was busy, 3 new admissions, 2 kids waiting on test results, Marcus just cleared for discharge. I said goodbye to the nurses I trusted and didn't let my face do anything I'd regret, because the hallway cameras were recording and I was aware, suddenly, of how everything looked versus how everything was. When I got to my car there was an envelope under my windshield wiper. Ruth's handwriting. Asterisk, when they come for your work, remember why you chose to protect children. The answer is in my house. Asterisk. I drove to the Victorian mansion on a Tuesday, because old habits, and let myself in with the brass key. The house smelled like cedar and old paper and something floral I'd never asked the name of. Every room was precisely maintained, every surface dust-free, everything suggesting someone who'd lived with intention. But the study was something else entirely. David, the cybersecurity specialist Benjamin had sent ahead, was already set up when I arrived, his metal briefcase open on Ruth's desk, equipment laid out with careful precision. Your aunt, he said, without looking up, built something the FBI would genuinely be impressed by. 6 monitors in a semicircle. Climate-controlled backup drives. A server rack humming quietly in the corner. And years of footage organized with the methodical precision of a federal prosecutor building a racketeering case. Every room in the house had its own folder. Each folder organized by date, time, activity level. The AI filtering system Ruth had apparently built herself had flagged 2,847 hours of relevant footage. 156 separate audio files marked as priority. 13 years of evidence waiting in the dark. David pulled up the folder marked monthly visitors, 3rd Thursdays. 16 documented visits. Thomas and Diane, every 3rd Thursday for 3 years, arriving at precisely 2:30 p.m., staying between 45 minutes and 90 minutes, leaving with expressions of satisfaction that looked nothing like family visits. David cued the most recent audio recording, 3 weeks before Ruth's death, and the study filled with my father's voice, clear and matter-of-fact and utterly without hesitation. The Hargrove situation worked out better than expected. They're interested in expanding significantly. Diane's response: how many additional placements are they requesting? 6 initially, with potential for more. 22,000 each this time. They specifically want clean backgrounds. Ages 16 to 19 preferred. My hand started shaking. Not because I was surprised. Not entirely. But there's a difference between understanding something intellectually. I found the document, I know what they did, I've had weeks to absorb it, and hearing your father's voice discuss the sale of teenagers the same way he'd have discussed a policy renewal. The same tone. The same professional cadence. Clean backgrounds, he'd said. 16 to 19 preferred. I was 16. My background was clean. I had no family connections who would have noticed if I disappeared. I was the prototype. Benjamin arrived an hour into my review of the files and spread Rebecca Holt's investigation reports across Ruth's dining room table with the care of someone handling evidence, which is exactly what it was. 347 pages. 13 years of continuous surveillance. Financial analysis that revealed payments from 17 client families across Oregon and Washington and, more recently, Northern California. The business model documented with devastating clarity: find isolated teenagers with no support systems, offer them temporary housing as a bridge to independence, gradually introduce longer-term arrangements that escalated into situations the victims couldn't escape without losing everything the Aldridges had given them. They currently have 6 active placements, Benjamin said. Rebecca identified them last week. All 6 are in situations that require immediate federal intervention. He set a business card on the table beside the files. Special Agent Diana Walsh, FBI Portland Field Office, Human Trafficking Unit. Ruth's instructions were to contact Agent Walsh the moment your parents filed their lawsuit. Which they have. The federal case is prepared: financial records, surveillance footage, audio documentation, background files on all 17 client families. Rebecca has been in contact with 11 adult survivors who've agreed to provide witness statements. He looked at me across Ruth's dining room table with 13 years of evidence spread between us. The children they currently have placed, the Aldridges are planning to leave Portland within 48 hours if we don't move. They've been liquidating accounts. Rebecca tracked 2 one-way flight purchases this morning. I looked at Ruth's handwriting on the evidence folder labels. Her precise, careful letters. The same handwriting from the birthday cards and the Tuesday envelopes and the keynote and the final text message. You're not their victim anymore. You're their judgment. The decision wasn't difficult. It was the easiest thing I'd ever done. Benjamin's call to the Aldridge's attorney was brief and precise in the particular way that legal communications are when they're carrying live ammunition. James Calloway of Calloway and Stride had built his reputation on aggressive probate litigation, but nothing in his professional experience had apparently prepared him for what Benjamin delivered in 6 sentences. We have comprehensive video and audio documentation of your clients discussing child placement activities constituting federal trafficking offenses, spanning 13 years. This includes financial records, witness statements from 11 adult survivors, and active FBI involvement. Your clients have 24 hours to withdraw their will contest or face immediate federal prosecution under the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. I'd recommend you advise them carefully. The evidence package is complete and has already been transmitted to the Portland Field Office. The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. I'll need to examine this evidence immediately. FBI Portland Field Office, Conference Room B, 1 hour. Agent Walsh will be present. I've tried several times to find the right words for that federal conference room. The quality of the silence when Benjamin finished playing the selected audio recordings. The way Thomas seemed to age a decade in 10 minutes, his face settling into something I'd never seen before, not rage, not calculation, the particular collapsed expression of someone who has run out of moves and knows it. Diane staring at the table surface. James Calloway closing his legal pad and then opening it again and then closing it again. Agent Walsh took notes with the focused stillness of someone who had been waiting for this meeting for longer than the rest of us. What's more immediately concerning than the recordings, she said, is the ongoing investigation into Bright Futures Youth Consulting and the 17 client families we've identified across 3 states. We'll be executing search warrants within 48 hours. The 6 current placements are being located and secured as we speak. James Calloway closed his briefcase with hands that weren't entirely steady. I'm withdrawing from this case immediately. My clients will require separate representation for any new federal allegations. Thomas and Diane made one last attempt. I was back at the hospital. Dr. Osei had called the morning after news of the federal investigation became public, her apology careful and genuine, my position reinstated immediately, when security buzzed the pediatric ward. 2 individuals asking for Claire Aldridge. They don't have visitor authorization. I went to the hallway. They looked diminished in a way I hadn't expected. Smaller. The Yellow House Authority, the We Saved You Authority, all of it just gone, like a projection that needed a specific light to function, and the light had been turned off. Diane's composure was cracking invisible fault lines. Thomas's face was mottled with something between rage and desperation. You've destroyed everything, Diane said, her voice low and shaking. We gave you a home. We gave you a family. We gave you opportunities you never would have had without us. We saved you from the system, Claire, and you've, You're absolutely right, I said. They stopped. You did make me who I am. You taught me exactly what it looks like when adults exploit children who have no one to protect them. You showed me what that fear does to a person's nervous system, how it lives in the body for years, how it shapes every professional instinct and every choice. You gave me 13 years of motivation to spend my career standing between vulnerable children and the adults who want to hurt them. Security arrived. Thomas was still talking as they escorted him out, something about ingratitude, about everything they'd sacrificed, about how I was destroying innocent people who'd only ever tried to help. The hospital's security system recorded every word. It was submitted as supplemental character evidence 3 months later. They arrested Thomas and Diane at Portland International Airport 18 hours after that hallway conversation. Separate red-eye flights. One-way tickets purchased under names that didn't match their identification. $127,000 in cash distributed between their luggage. Falsified identity documents. Contact information for placement networks operating in 2 European countries. They weren't just running from federal prosecution. They were attempting to rebuild. The FBI case became the largest human trafficking investigation in Oregon history. 12 primary defendants. 6 federal counts including conspiracy to transport minors across state lines for purposes of commercial sexual exploitation, racketeering charges, and obstruction. The trial took 4 months. Room 12 of the federal courthouse heard testimony from 17 adult survivors, 43 witnesses, and the complete 13 years of Ruth's documented evidence. Rebecca Holt sat in the witness box for 3 days and presented her investigation with the steady precision of someone who'd spent 13 years waiting to do exactly this. Thomas and Diane Aldridge were sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. I sat in the gallery for the sentencing and felt something I hadn't expected. Not relief, exactly. Not triumph. Something quieter. Something that felt like the end of a very long-held breath. Ruth's final recording was made at 3:47 a.m. on October 1st, the morning of her death. I found it in the security system's priority files, flagged and labeled in her usual precise way. Her voice was weaker than I'd ever heard it, thin, careful with breath, but absolutely clear in its intention. Claire. If you're hearing this, they've done exactly what I predicted. Good. I've been counting on their greed since 2011. A pause. The sound of medical equipment, steady beeping. I need you to know something about that summer. I knew what they'd done to you within weeks of it happening. I hired Rebecca immediately. And then I made a decision that I've questioned every day since. I decided that the evidence needed to be comprehensive before we moved. That if we stopped at you, the network would simply continue with someone else. Another pause. I am sorry for every day of those 13 years. I am sorry for every moment you spent not knowing the truth about yourself. I hope the work we built together is some kind of answer to that. I hope you understand that every Tuesday at Powell's, every envelope, every text message, those weren't strategy. Those were me trying to be your family when I couldn't yet be your defender. The recording was quiet for a moment. Just the beeping. Your real name isn't Aldridge. Your biological mother was my closest friend. She died when you were 3 years old and you were placed through a system that the Aldridges manipulated to access you. Your real name and your mother's history are in the safe in my bedroom. The combination is her birthday. March 4, 1971. She took a breath. You're not their victim anymore, Claire. You're the reason 13 years of this work matters. You're the reason 6 children are going home. A longer pause. The key is in the envelope. It opens the safe. The safe held a file folder, a photograph, and a handwritten letter. The file folder contained my real birth certificate, my biological parents' marriage certificate, and documentation of what I'd actually inherited from my mother's estate, a modest amount that the people who'd acquired me had successfully diverted, but that the Foundation's attorneys have since recovered through civil proceedings. The photograph was of 2 women in their late 20s, laughing at something outside the frame of the picture, squinting a little in bright sunlight. One of them was Ruth, younger, recognizable. The other woman I'd never seen before and recognized instantly, the particular shape of the face, the way she held her shoulders, the hands. My hands. My mother. The letter was short. Her name was Margaret. She was braver than anyone I've ever known and she would have been so proud of you. You have her hands. You have her stubbornness. You have her absolute refusal to accept that the world has to be the way it is. She would have loved to know you chose to protect children for a living. She would have loved to see what you're going to do next. With all my love, R**. Ruth Whitmore's Foundation for Exploited Children opened 8 months after the federal trial concluded. Headquartered in the Victorian mansion on the north side of the city, the one that smells like cedar and old paper and something floral I finally asked about, Lily of the Valley, from a garden Ruth had maintained in the back for 20 years. Initial funding of $5 million from the inheritance, supplemented by contributions from the technology community when the story of Ruth's cybersecurity company became public. The company she'd founded in 2012, 1 year after learning what the Aldridges had done to me, had been specifically designed to build child protection systems, algorithms that identify predatory contact patterns across digital platforms, security protocols for vulnerable populations. The company that acquired it in 2019 integrated her technology into their mobile operating system. Millions of devices now carry software Ruth built in the first year after she learned I'd been sold. I run the foundation now. We've pulled children out of 3 separate networks across 2 states. I've trained nurses in 156 hospitals across the Pacific Northwest to see what took me years to learn to see: the flinch, the hypervigilance, the eyes that are older than they should be, the particular way a child makes themselves very quiet and very agreeable around adults they don't trust. I know what that looks like because I lived it. I know what it costs because I counted the price for 13 years without knowing what I was counting. The brass key sits on my desk. I keep it there because people sometimes ask about it during foundation meetings, and it makes a useful entry point into a conversation about Ruth, about the case, about what 13 years of patient evidence building looks like when it finally comes apart into justice. It photographs well. It's appeared in 2 magazine profiles now, sitting on my desk in the study of the Victorian mansion, which is how Ruth would have found that deeply amusing and also entirely predictable. But that's not really why I keep it. I keep it because of the moment Benjamin slid it across the mahogany table inside a cream envelope with my name on it, and I picked it up, and it was cold, cold in the specific way of something that has been waiting a very long time in a very dark place, and across that table my father's face went white with the particular terror of a man who realizes the locked room has been opened. I keep it because it was the first moment in 29 years that I understood the difference between the story I'd been told about my life and the actual truth of it. I keep it because Ruth held it last. Every morning I sit down at this desk, in this house that smells like her, surrounded by files and case documentation and photographs of children we've managed to reach in time, and I pick up the key for a moment before I start work. It's still cold. It's always cold. Some things stay exactly what they are regardless of how much time passes or how much light you bring to them, and some things, held long enough in careful hands, become something entirely different from what they started as. Ruth knew the difference. She spent 13 years making sure I would too.